This is a very exciting panel, and we have two very different and complementary leaders in education. I want to give you both a chance to do opening remarks. Success Academy, Root Ed Alliance. Of course, very different and complementary. I mean, fundamentally, one is kind of urban and one is rural, but representing the diversity of our country and different solutions. Eva Moskowitz, trailblazing founder of Success Academy Charter School, 2006 now, almost 20 years. It's incredible. I can't believe it's been that long. It's one of the fastest growing, highest performing public charter school networks in the country. 50 schools, over 20,000 students, transformative results. It ranked #1 in New York State for math test scores for 7 years in a row. Every graduate has been accepted to college. Congratulations on all your success. We look forward to hearing about lessons learned for our governors. Noah Meyer, the board chair of Root Ed Alliance, really focused on rural America to make sure that no American is left behind. It places dedicated college and career advisors directly in rural high schools to work with all students. You know, very different kind of challenges, right? Like the success model isn't going to work in a town of 350 people. Like there's no people there, right? So how do you have different models in different parts of our country and different parts of our state? And I represent a state where we have cities, we have suburbs, we have rural areas where, you know, the entire county is 2,000 people. So really diverse solutions. Root Ed has 20,000 high school seniors in 225 rural high schools that are served, 48,000 students served to date. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Eva Moskowitz and Noah Meyer, and we'd love to hear your thoughts.
Thank you, Governor, and thank you all for being here. There are a lot of things to say about success, but I wanted to start by saying our current system, in my opinion, is profoundly broken. And if you don't start from that premise, and we can debate it, I would argue that all of the international studies, our own NAEP scores for many years in a row, would lead one to conclude that we have a very broken system. And I think it goes to the economic competitiveness of this nation. I think it goes to civic democracy. So I view fixing our system as our #1 domestic issue, whether you are representing a highly rural state, a southern state, a northeastern state. All of the data suggests that we have a pretty significant problem, and the problem is beyond poor children. It disadvantages poor children, but even our affluent children are not very competitive with the most competitive countries around the globe. So when I founded Success, I wasn't going for incrementalism. I was going for reimagining public education in the most profound way. I was shooting for educational nirvana in schooling. I have not succeeded at that, but that was the goal. How do you create a joyful environment where there are high levels of learning density, and where teachers and educational leaders are highly accountable for the outcomes for students? And we define the outcomes as minimally the external tests and measures, but that's the floor, that is not the ceiling. Our goal is to have intellectually self-confident and self-directed students who are well educated, and that broad goal can be accomplished not only through academics, but I would argue it may be even easier to accomplish in music, dance, sports, chess, coding, debate, etc. So we are really taking a whole child approach to the education of our students. And I would say one key to our success, in addition to the rigorous content, is our investment in educator training. My view, my personal view, is that not only are our schools quite broken, but our schools of education are not meeting the needs of current teachers
Real
and
quickly, did you have your
educational
own,
leaders.
is it your own proprietary one? Did you set it up yourselves? Do you kind of run that whole teacher education piece
We
yourself? or-
do.
Yeah.
We do 13 weeks of teacher training,
Mm-hmm.
but we open it up to any district. We've trained a lot of educators from Denver.
Mm-hmm.
We open it up nationally, and we're building out something bigger that would allow us to even do more sharing. So I'm sure there's more to say and more questions, but I'll stop there.
Thank you.
Great.
Noah?
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Governor, and everybody for having me and for the opportunity to talk a little bit about Rooted Alliance. Rooted Alliance is a national nonprofit that places dedicated college and career advisors in rural high schools. We were founded by a group of business-owning families. We began in Missouri, but we're now in 5 other states. And the kind of premise behind Rooted was really that many of the families who started Rooted were first generation to go to college, some of whom graduated in the 70s, where the motivation, the community really rallied behind the idea that going to college was the kind of penultimate realization of the American dream and being able to pursue economic mobility through that pathway. But as I think many of you in this room know all too well, the reality for rural communities has shifted dramatically over the last 30 years. And poverty, homelessness, food insecurity, drug addiction have come to really define in the reality in far too many rural communities. And as a result, the prospects and possibility for rural students has diminished, and there are far too few resources that are going to address those needs. So about 7% of philanthropic dollars.
One thing, how do
nationally-
you define rural? Like, we always wonder, but like, what does it mean
It
to you?
shifts. I mean, we generally think about communities that are under 50,000, but most of the communities where we're operating are 10,000 or smaller. I'd say that the school sizes on average, the senior class is about 150 students. But it could be smaller, it could be bigger, but that's ballpark, that's about average.
Are there rural parts of Rhode Island and New Jersey, or not? There are, yeah. What about Rhode Island?
Yes.
There are, right, yeah. Well, Colorado, clearly, lots of rural communities.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, really, we have that question of how, that's why I just wanted to ask. how
Yeah.
we're thinking about it, yeah.
I mean, and also, we generally stay away from working in suburban communities. But we go into the schools that are in the communities that have, that are the hardest. And our goal certainly is, we have a whole school model where we place a dedicated college and career advisor to work alongside guidance counselors. And guidance counselors, again, as all of you know, are really the front line of defense. They're really more social workers now and their goal is primarily to get kids to graduate from high school. And so very few of them have the time, the bandwidth, and in some cases the expertise to be able to advise kids on what the best fit is for them after they graduate. We as an organization are completely agnostic about what that best fit is. Anything from military service all the way to 4-year works for us, and everything in between. But the idea and the goal ultimately is to have every kid have a plan A and a plan B when they graduate, and to give them exposure to career opportunities locally if that's where they want to stay, to give them exposure to college visits, and really to understand what economic prospects there are for them and how they're tied to educational opportunities and career opportunities.
Great, we'll start with Governor McKee.
Well, first, congratulations on the work you're doing. I may have even visited one of the success schools a few years back, if you recall.
Yes.
And took a lot of that information and created our own model in Rhode Island. So I think we're tracking about 8,000 kids, but in the strategy that we did in Rhode Island. But if you could, when you're talking about, could you just go back to this, it's broken. I've heard this a couple times today. And are we at a moment where you could address that, because of maybe the current, mood of the country that is looking for change? I think that clearly that's happening. But could you go back and say this is broken because, and then what are the maybe 3 things that you would do to unbreak it?
And let me just sort of amplify that. Like, let's pretend none of that systems existed out there. There are no systems. You're inventing what education looks like for our country. What do you design? as a new system to replace the old? Because it's easy to attack and take down kind of what's there, but not easy, but I mean, you've done it. But I mean, what is the better version, if you will, right?
Yeah, I think the better version is, multifaceted. Some of it is instructional and content-related. So there's really no excuse for failing to teach a child to count. Like, it's not that hard. We've done much harder things in this country. And so that's why I say it's broken. It would be different if we were failing maybe to teach 100% of kids AP Calc or AP Stats, but we have a reading and accounting problem that is pretty basic. So I think some of the answer is the content that we teach, which is really driven by the big publishing houses, not necessarily what children need. But some of it is also how do we engage parents? And I think we're a little confused in America about that. I personally believe in parental choice, but it goes way beyond parental choice. We really need to engage parents in our schools. We have 5 things that we expect all parents to do. I don't think they're particularly difficult. We don't ask our parents to run our schools. We ask them to do 5 things. Show up every day your child is not too sick to come to school. Chronic absenteeism in America is extraordinarily high. We ask our parents to show up on time. If you are outside of most urban schools, you would not be able to tell what time school starts because there's a 3-hour window of folks showing up. We ask parents, third, to not sign the homework if the homework is not done. It's called homework because it's supposed to be done at home, not in school. And that partnership that we're going to do most of the educating, but there's a small part of it that parents must do. We ask that all parents return our phone calls in 24 hours, and we promise to do the same. And we ask all parents to show up at events celebrating their child's achievement or growth. And that may sound like an obvious standard. And by the way, it doesn't have to be the parent. It could be the second cousin twice removed. It could be a neighbor. But someone who loves the kid or knows the kid who's there to celebrate the child. And we find that those 5 things are not done at 100% of schools in America.
And you feel that's exportable? You think every school should do this, rural, urban, district?
I don't think,
everybody.
yeah, I think I don't see how you have a good school and bypass
Now,
parents.
let me ask you a quick follow-up before I go back.
Okay.
What do you do with the parents who don't and can't? So they're an addict, they're ill, mentally ill, they're in bed. I mean, how do you make sure those kids aren't the parents failing them? I mean, it's a bad parent, God forbid it happens. So how do you do that when it's not the kid's fault? The parents maybe,
Yeah.
suffering from depression and staying in bed all day or whatever.
I get asked this all the time. Insistence that something be done will get you very, very
Yeah.
far. And we negotiate with the parent. Okay, you can't come. Who can
An
come?
aunt, an uncle,
Or
a grandma,
how
yeah.
about a parent who lives next door? Can we introduce you to that parent? When religious organizations used to help each other in a community, schools could take that attitude that these are our constituents. When you run a 500-kid elementary school, I realize that may not resonate in rural areas, but someone lives nearby and can help do all the things. So we have not found that we can't find a way under, over, and around if the school is flexible and caring and, creative.
So one of the things that certainly I've come to know, but I instinctively I know that for us to kind of move the bar relative inside our schools, the schools got virtually everything they can handle on their plate right now, and especially coming out of COVID. So I'll ask, I'll just lay this question out, but I'd love to have a response down the line or even now. But, so I'm empowering municipal leaders throughout the state as a former mayor. And one of the main objectives right now is to empower municipal leaders to engage with parents on the very issues you're talking about, so that it supports what's happening inside the schools. So when you mentioned the 4 or 5 things you're doing with parents, I did a lot of coaching, coached in many family situations, I think pretty broad. I've never really seen a parent didn't want their kid to do well, even though a lot of the parents didn't know what that meant, right? But, so thoughts about, maybe even down the line, in terms of how can I help the municipalities engage with parents in a way that supports what you're talking about?
Yeah, and I think one of the things that schools have gotten away from is that you do have to inspire participation. You all know from politics that everyone doesn't come out to vote. You have to inspire that level of participation and really make it in everyone's self-interest to be there. We spend a great deal of energy on our recitals and performances because it's one of the ways we can draw the parents in, and when they see how great the dance recital is, they want to be part of the community. But I think if you take children and parents as a captive audience instead of, frankly, as your customers, you're going to get a apathetic response. And as you said, Governor, I've never met a parent who doesn't love their child. That, in 20 years, I've met many parents who don't know the best way to express that love or the best way to parent or, get their kid into college or, many other things. But there is a basic foundation of love that I think schools are not capitalizing on. I know I'm putting that in sort of blunt terms, but I do think schools have to capitalize on it.
She's great. I gotta go with
Thank you. Governor Murphy, I want to go to Tammy Murphy after Governor Murphy, and then I have some questions as well. Governor Murphy.
Thank you, Jared. No, I think you're a recovering, as my wife and I, recovering Goldman Sachs
I am.
banker. I'll keep
Good
you in
to
my
see you.
prayers. What states are you in?
We are in Missouri, Arkansas, partnered with Heartland Forward. We are in Idaho, we are in Texas, and we're in Alaska. And we were in Tennessee, but we graduated out of Tennessee.
This is a nonpartisan organization. It's one of the last ones still around that works, I have to say. But those are all red states. Is there a bias by the founders, or it just happens to be that way?
No bias, just opportunity and demand and appreciation and a recognition for the unique needs of rural communities. And so we were invited in.
Could you see going to a state, and I'm not asking you for a commitment, that looks a lot different, like New Jersey? And
We would go anywhere where we had partnership and alignment. Our model really hinges on public-private. And so the way that we think about our philanthropic dollars, we think of them as risk capital, which I'm sure isn't the first time you've heard that, where we're willing to test out opportunities and different models with philanthropic dollars and then link arms with government. And so Missouri has been a great home for us to get started. We're now in half of the rural high schools in the state of Missouri.
Wow.
We started first with 8 using philanthropic dollars. And then during COVID, we worked with DESE, the K-12 agency in Missouri, to use some of their ESSERS funds to expand into 135 rural high schools.
Have they found a way to keep you there after those funds rolled off?
Yeah, the governor just got us in his budget last year, and then the new governor this year just added another $1 million to it. So it's we have 3.5.
And what
annually.
metrics do you look at to show your own success in demonstrating the difference you're making for those
Yeah,
kids?
I mean, we measure expansively, and that's been a huge part of what we're doing today. 29% of our students, more of our students are pursuing college and career opportunities than before
A
Rooted.
29% increase.
29% increase,
Yeah.
And we're seeing 50% fewer pursuing low-skill jobs immediately after school. So that for us has been a huge metric. because in rural communities, often the first line of defense is just to go work at, say, a gas station or a business that's not, doesn't provide any kind of long-term possibility. And the advisors work really hard to engage with students and put them in training programs that enable them to build stackable credentials and skills that can enable economic mobility. We're also seeing that 12% of our graduates return for their second year of college. So the persistence rates are really high. And we've seen a 27% increase in FAFSA rates, which is 20% higher than the national average. So it's been huge.
On
from a
that, by
FAFSA
the way,
perspective.
Eva, do you have universal FAFSA as a requirement for graduation? I know you have college application. Do you also require they fill out FAFSA?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, we're
just-
trying to get this done in
We
Colorado.
passed a law, we signed a law to,
I'm
in
jealous.
Jersey.
We're trying to do that, Phil. Tell my
Keep
legislature.
looking at Jersey, baby.
Tell my legislature it is possible.
You said Missouri, Noah, was $3.5 million?
Yeah.
That's a pretty small amount for the impact you're having, right?
Yeah, but it works. I mean, those dollars go, the way that we've structured it is that Rooted National covers all of the training and all of the infrastructure
Okay.
and management and oversight, and then that money goes to pay for the salaries of
The actual
yeah, for
individuals.
the advisors.
Eva, I should know this because I'm right across the Hudson from you. A, are you unionized? And B, are you in the district side of the house like this all the time? Or is there how would you describe the relationship?
No, we're not unionized, and being so would be a considerable detriment to the work we do. In terms of district, I wouldn't say that we have tension with the district. We have, we are co-located in most of our schools in underutilized space, which is a public policy that I think is very, very important for the country. We have increasing numbers of underutilized buildings, and thanks to Mayor Bloomberg and Joel Klein, they adopted first the policy that an underutilized building could be used for any kind of public school, whether it be district or charter. And what that has allowed us to do is to scale fast. I don't think I would be at 57 campuses in 19 years if I had to build a building, raise all the money, become a construction
Sure.
general manager, and all that. So, and so when we do the co-location, imagine you have a 2-bedroom apartment, 1 bedroom is spare, and then I come along and say, Governor, couldn't I use that spare bedroom to educate children? When you initially do that, there is a little bit of
Yep.
friction. But once we get past that, we have not found there to be friction.
Do you find that the other bedroom's performance goes up?
It does.
As a result of your?
It does.
That
It
didn't come out
actually-
right. I got to scratch that for the record.
It actually does, first and foremost, initially, from a safety and cleanliness perspective, just the upkeep, the security agents show up, the custodians do their job, the nurses are there, and then actually, I've done quite a bit of research on the academic performance. It's not that they meet our standards, but they tend to go up by 10 or 15% with our presence there.
Are all of your schools co-located, or out of your, is it 50 now?
54 of 57
So
are.
nearly all, okay.
Nearly all.
Tammy Murphy.
Listen, I would say, first of all, the public-private partnership piece, I think, is so important, and I've now heard that over multiple panels today, and it's something that we're doing in New Jersey in a lot of ways. Not necessarily in education, we are doing it in education, but in other areas, and I can't underscore how important it is, the ownership, the buy-in, and the community building part, so I love that. I'm just curious, is there a country, is there a perfect state, is there something that you look to for best practices when you're trying to build upon yourself and make yourself even better? And I'm particularly interested to know in the United States which state might be deemed to be doing the best job.
Yeah, I think I have borrowed bits and pieces from different countries. So for example, the Netherlands has amongst the most sophisticated problem-solving curriculum in mathematics. I don't know if I can say that, obviously the data indicates that there are better states and worse states. The data indicates also there are states that have made growth, so I would put Mississippi in that category. In terms of the bar, Massachusetts has sort of outperformed many other states. But I would say that, many of the school districts have similar results because they are subject to similar curriculum, teacher training practices, even though the School of Education in New Jersey might be different than a School of Education in New York. They're more or less similar in their approach. And, the way we do teacher training is pretty different than the way most schools of education do the training.
Who do you start with there? Are they college grads in a different liberal arts field? Are they only associate's degree folks? Who's coming in? Obviously, they have not graduated from schools of education, or if they are, you're retraining them, you're untraining them from what they learned. But what are they generally? Who are your new class of teachers?
They're college grads.
Just in whatever. It could be a math, philosophy, English,
Yeah,
engineering.
sometimes they've studied education, but they are not, they are not 10-year veterans
Right.
of another school system who are hopping over. Remember, I have a much longer day and a longer school year, and there is tremendous accountability, and so not everyone wants to work in that environment.
Can I just
Yep.
answer the question about best practice for a state? And I neglected to mention that we're also in Texas, which is actually, there's a really interesting model there. The reason we went to Texas, no, we're not, we're in rural communities, but is House Bill 2, which essentially is an incentive-based program which reimburses school districts who place students in post-secondary pathways, and they can get reimbursed up to $5,000 per student. And so the model, particularly from a public-private partnership perspective, is a really smart approach because it enables us to go into the schools. So we make basically a seed investment where we're fronting the money, if we just boil it down to the money piece of it, where we bring our infrastructure, we work with local partners, and Texas is so huge, so we have different regional partners, so it could be a community college who's our local partner, or a workforce board, because that's the cornerstone of all of our work is really implementing through local partners who know the communities. And one rural community looks like one rural community, so you really have to have it be incredibly localized. And with that process, they're able to implement our training program, and then after 2 years, the money starts reimbursing and starts paying for itself. So it actually enables us to start to be able to expand beyond the schools because they're self-sustaining.
So, in kind of one of the things that we're focused on, a big part of our initiative is how do we sort of better measure outcomes. And you both touched upon this, and I kind of want to ask you directly. And so with EVA schools, wow, the math proficiency, et cetera, one of the things we're talking about is okay, and I'm sure you agree, kids need to be proficient in math and reading, but that's also not enough. What else do they need to know? How do you focus on measuring whether you're achieving that? Noah, you touched on a few of yours. Are they in low-wage jobs, or how many are going to higher-wage jobs after grad? First of all, interested in how you're measuring those things, because we as states want to do a better job measuring those things for all students, not just rural students. But what kind of metrics should we be focused on for whether kids are succeeding, and how can we as states drive that, because we are big funders of education?
Yeah, I think there are many metrics. We look at attendance, we look at homework completion and homework quality, and I think it's not because we live and die by homework, but it is a proxy for self-directedness. What happens when the teacher is not hovering, or when the parent is not hovering? Those proxies are very, very important. As the kids get older, we are looking at SAT scores. We think that the SAT or ACT, those scores and the growth in those scores give a real sense of scholar preparedness. It's not actually a very hard test, and I think Americans have gotten a little bit spooked. If you can't get a 650 on the math of the SAT, your ability to pursue STEM is extremely limited. That is the floor, not the ceiling, and we aspire for 60% of our students to major in math, science, or engineering. By the way, that still leaves 40% for poetry and history, so don't worry, we're not excluding those kids, but we think it's a.
They also 100% get into college, about what percent go?
100% get into four-year colleges and go, and graduate, about 85% graduate in 4 years. 100% go to four-year college. Nope, 100%. This is our 8th year. We have 2 kids who have not gotten in yet. No, it's 100%. This year's class, we have 2 who have not gotten in yet. Remember, the decisions have not come out yet, but we will have 100% going, and we have extremely high rates of 4-year college graduation rates.
I'm glad you tracked that too, because as you said, going isn't enough. In fact, in many ways, the worst deal is you go and don't make it, and you have the debt and you don't have the degree, so success is very important.
Jared just asked me to ask again, 100% go?
100% go.
Just want to make sure I got that right. Thank you.
Yes. Yes, and by the way, I mean, you have challenges with rural students, and they're very different. But the college application process is rigged against poor students.
Yeah.
It takes a tremendous amount of effort to do the 19 parts of the college application. Affluent parents outsource this. They hire a consultant, an advisor, an SAT prep person. It's actually quite difficult. 94% of our students are kids of color, and most of our students are the first in their families to go to college. So their parents have not necessarily been through that whole process.
What percent are first generation about?
About 77%.
Vast majority, yeah.
Are first gen.
You tell those 2 kids to get hopping, my goodness. Tell them Governor
Well,
Polis
it's
said
the
they better get going.
colleges that are not
Yeah.
responding fast
They
enough.
go to the University of Colorado.
We'll take them, Noah.
I'll talk a little bit just about,
And by the way, a big difference also in rural is sometimes higher ed requires a major relocation, and it's not, leaving your family. So it's very different than, in probably New York City alone, there's got to be, I don't even know how many colleges and junior colleges there are, but rural, it might mean hundreds of miles sometimes,
yeah, that's actually an interesting point, which I could come back to. But, so our advisors we've systematized the process for, and we have a whole data system for how we track whether or not they're hitting their targets. So they have a certain number of minimum meetings that they need to have with students, sit down one-on-one where they pull them out of class. They help them explore career opportunities, identify training programs. They do work closely with them on their FAFSA forms and their parents, and many of the parents don't have, obviously, tax returns, which is a whole other complication.
Some of ours don't pay taxes.
Yeah,
We
exactly.
discover.
Do you have, we have this, do others, we have like a state standalone FAFSA version for sort of undocumented and immigrants. Do you guys have that? Yeah. Do the red states have that?
I don't know the answer to that.
Oh, yeah, I don't know. We have that, because we have some state aid that they can get, that they can't get the federal aid, but yeah. Not as much as the federal, but we have some.
Yeah, they take them to visit college fairs. They set up job shadowing, and in Missouri, we're working with 700 businesses across the state to create direct exposure. And a point was made in the earlier panel about the misalignment of available jobs historically, and the skills that are available for kids, and the mismatch. And one of the things that we've really targeted and I think been able to make some serious progress on is working with businesses to identify what are the skills they need to fill the jobs that are available, to the point that you were making about proximity, because rural communities often, the students, their geography hurdles, but there's also a desire often for rural kids to stay close to home for a whole array of.
Well, from the community's perspective, sometimes if they leave, they don't come back, and so there's that.
It's a
And by the
huge
way,
issue.
I want to thank Western Governors as part of that solution too, in rural.
So that
Yeah.
has proven to be a really, really important facet for us, is working very closely with the community. And also there's, the parents have, it's interesting to hear you describe kind of how you engage with the parents, because we have a little bit of everything in rural communities, where you have parents who are really suspicious of seeing there is the brain drain issue, and
Could
there-
also be honest government. They don't like.
yeah, in some cases,
Yeah.
that is also the
Yeah.
case. And how these advisors, one of among the most successful advisors are those who are from the community, and they're trusted by the families, and they get stopped in the grocery store, they get stopped in church. They've become a critical part of the solution, because the guidance counselors haven't had the time or don't have the expertise in answering helping them navigate this labyrinth of how to get a plan, whether it's, again, enlisting in the military, going to your local technical college, going to a 2-year school, or going to a 4-year program. You need somebody with a lot of training and
So
expertise.
we only have about 10 minutes. I want to open it up to our panel and all of our great thought leaders here, who has some questions or comments for a terrific panel here. Governor,
You got one over
okay, Mary?
Yeah, hello. So comment that
Introduce yourself
actually-
briefly.
Sorry, Mary LaFay with ACT. This comment, and it's kind of a question too, but it actually borders across both panels. So there was a comment, again, that was just mentioned again about this disconnect between, again, local partners, between the education training providers and local employers, especially in areas where people aren't necessarily looking to migrate out of those geographical areas. And the example was given of that major announcement for U.S. Steel, Mississippi County, Arkansas, who has been a certified ACT work-ready community since 2017, the whole purpose of which is to provide easy connections between local partners for economic development and attraction. So the only reason I bring that up is because these rural communities are the ones that benefit from these types of partnerships the most. Not to say that urban communities can't, but just they have different barriers and different needs in terms of metrics to show that they have a shovel-ready workforce, that they have vibrant partnerships, because those partnerships aren't going to be necessarily as well-funded as some of those in the more metro areas of our country. And so just wanted to point that out, and that these communities are doing a lot of hard work to try to bridge those divides with local employers. And this is actually a question, but the gentleman left. There was a comment made earlier about the black hole of data around non-degree credentials, which I believe is a sore spot for a lot of state data systems. But this is kind of a question to governors, and I guess, what about putting the onus on the credentialing providers to pony up some of that information? Some of the research that they might have done,
They might have research, but they're not, are you saying require that they effectively follow the people who are credentialed so that they provide the data back about employment and that sort
or
of
at
thing?
least enter into
Yeah.
data sharing partnerships with states so that data can be tracked longitudinally. If the state doesn't have it in their own data
Yeah.
systems, do that data
And
partnership.
it's part of kind of being validated as a credential effectively. It's a good point. Other comments? Governor Murphy, you have another one?
I was just going to ask that any one of our panelists, maybe Eva, start with you, abolishing the U.S. Department of Education, good move, bad move? Does it come with a cost? Does it come with a benefit?
Well, I do think that in all federal and state and local government, there is excessive bureaucracy. So there is no doubt a way to approach that. I think it would be very unfortunate if the educational data and research part of the US DOE was eliminated. It's vital for a country to understand the performance of its students. And we rely on a lot of that data Having said that, when you have to deal with the US DOE, you often wonder, where is the emphasis on children and teaching and learning? And I would say the same thing about the state ed department in New York or the New York City Department of Education. There are a lot of people, and it is not materially improving the lives of children, but I think throwing everything out without some more strategic, deliberate approach, you're going to end up with a level of chaos. And so we have to do that thoughtfully.
I'm going to sidestep my opinion about about the question, but I will say that we have kind of two arms to the work that we do, and I've spoken up until now on the operational piece, where we're in 5 states, more than 200 schools, we've reached 48,000 kids. That's where we're able to where we Rooted can place direct, dedicated college and career advisors. We can't reach every community, we can't reach every state. So we've engaged in some advocacy work, which has led to a grant program administered through ED that distributes competitive grants, $1 to $2 million, to rural serving institutions in all 50 states who are looking for support for the type of work that Rooted advisors offer. It's called, they're RPED grants through the FIPSI program. And this is, I think, it started at 10 million. It's in the budget this year for 50 million. It keeps going up because there's demand, there's need. And I would hate to see, and it has nothing to do with us. We don't touch a penny of it. We're not involved. We just advocated for these dollars to be made available to your states and to any state. 30 states have accessed it, 62 communities across the country. And when I think about the types of opportunities that the Department of Education provides and offers to an array using models that work, it's hard to see or understand what could replace that.
We'll do any rapid fire. Are there one or two? So I have Melody. Any others who want to absolutely get in? Then we'll give our panelists the closing word. Okay, Melody, go ahead. Be quick.
And maybe this is more at the end, but I'm Eva, too, I think for you, I have a question and then sort of a comment that maybe the governors, you two, can weigh in on. I sometimes hear that we're failing kids terribly, and I would agree that there is, but again, it sort of hurts my heart because I do feel like we are doing a pretty good job. I was a teacher, so I think on the whole, teachers are there with the right thing. I'm wondering though, do you think that in all of the things that we've done in education, that accountability has led us down this path to really think that students are failing because we're measuring maybe measuring things and reporting out as an autopsy? So think about when we get the data and we get the information, we're measuring one thing, and I feel so strongly about we're not giving the right information to teachers to be able to even make informed decisions. So when we give them the data, it's post-mortem. And, we don't really have the tools, and maybe because I'm working out at a company that is working alongside of some states. I know in Utah we're working along with Rich to really look at information that puts the data in the hands of teachers earlier so they can make some decisions along the way. So when I was a classroom teacher, I come in and I have my little third graders, and the only information I got about those kids was what I learned in the teacher's lounge, and it wasn't always real informative about how they were doing. I didn't know where that child, what their background was, what their testing history was. And I just wonder if we were looking at and really had good data that could inform us early on and put it in the hands and have information that gave some information we could be more proactive instead of reactive to what's going on, change the narrative in America where we're not always just like, oh my gosh, look, because it's data that's after. And I know I didn't have it, and even as a state chief, I didn't always give the tools to my schools and my education. So I'm just curious how you react to that, because
It's an excellent point.
Yeah.
States are giving schools data often 4 months after.
next school year
The
often,
next school
yeah.
year. New York keeps going later and later. So I would say two things. You have to have internal assessments. I actually don't pay too much attention to that because I know, after every learning sequence across all 57 schools, how the students are doing, how the teachers are doing, where they need help, et cetera. I would also just say something about data, and you won't find a more data-driven school system than Success Academy, but I think data is the score at the end of the game. It doesn't tell you why you lost or won. The only way to know why you lost or won is to do something much more labor-intensive, which is to look at the scholar work. So we are maniacal about looking at the scholar work. What is the mathematical reasoning that the first grader is indicating? What is the model that they draw? And what does that reveal about their mathematical thinking? The data is insufficient, and all these people do sophisticated question item analysis, and I have found that the only way to really understand why the kid got that score is really to go back and look at how the kid annotated the poem, how the kid, what model they drew. And so I would argue, I'm not arguing for eliminating, of course, data. I agree with you that it's got to be pre-mortem, and you have to have time to fix things, but that we really need to expand our vision of what constitutes data, and we put scholar work at the heart of what we do.
Share your final thoughts with us.
I'm delighted to be here, and I would just say that as a country, we have to do better. And I get it sometimes painful. I'm not saying that teachers are not working super hard or superintendents are not giving it their all. They're actually super constrained, whether they're in districts or charters, about their ability to fundamentally change the way they're going about the work. But I don't think as a country we have infinite amounts of time. In fact, I think we have very little time before we will never catch up as a country. We have the educational haves and the educational have-nots, whether it's rural or urban. And I just hope you are movers and shakers politically in government. I hope we get our act together really quickly and find our collective will to solve a problem that is much easier to solve than some of our other problems. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Noah.
Thank you. I echo Eva's thanks for the opportunity to share a little bit about our work and the importance of rural communities. I guess I would just put a fine point on the urgency around what's happening in rural communities and the unique needs that rural communities are facing and how few resources are actually reaching them and how unique those resources need to be directed. Again, just pointing to Angie Cooper and Heartland Forward, who's been our partner in Arkansas, and recognize that where a public-private partnership with the state education, K-12, and with philanthropy can make the difference in reaching some of the hardest hit rural communities. And these are the types of examples, but they've been able especially to bring the governor to the table so that we're really working arm in arm around solutions for rural communities. It's often hard, given how deep and geographically diffuse rural communities are, to come up with solutions that are broad-reaching, but they exist. And we welcome the chance to talk to anybody about work that's being done, to share what we're doing and where we can be helpful. We'd love to be.
Let's give Eva and Noah a round of applause. Thank you both.